One of Astro Bot's most defining features, besides being a cutie patootie, are his laser legs. Not only are they a great way to defeat enemies, and in some cases the only way, they're also his double jump mechanic that give him a lot of extra height and distance. So it's safe to say they are an extremely important tool at our disposal, which begs the question, is it possible to beat the game without them? We start off on this deserty planet we just crash landed on, and the sole purpose of his being here is to teach us the basic movement mechanics of the game, the double jump of course being one of them, except doing that activates his lasers. Fortunately, there is a small workaround. While it is much less effective than the double jump, attacking in midair gives us that small amount of extra distance we need to cover the gap, and we can fly off and begin our journey of trying to beat Astro Bot without using his lasers. The satellite we just rescued discovers the Gorilla Nebula nearby, where me and my ship can fly down into our first planet, the Sky Garden. I walked through the level, collecting bots, killing enemies, all as usual, but then I came across a trio of Volties. Now on a normal run, they're a very basic enemy that you can easily one-shot with, well, Astro Bot's lasers. In fact, that's the only way to kill them. So for this entire challenge, I am unable to cause any harm to them, and if I step even a pixel too close, I will die on the spot. But they're also pretty stupid, so I can just jump over them as if they don't exist. I caught a couple extra bots and unlocked the Octo Balloon power, and with being able to jump as high and as far as we need now, the rest of the level is no problem. Heading down into Aztec Trials next, this world was fairly straightforward. We had the Twin Frog power up, which means most of the jumps were built around this mechanic. There was one difficult section towards the end with these rotating floors, but I managed to get past this by landing on the small red section just before the electric pad and jumping across from there. Bear in mind this section is only here to collect this bot. If I needed to, I could have just skipped the whole thing, but it's actually quite important that I find a way to get every bot I possibly can. In each galaxy there is a limit to how many bots you need to find in order to unlock the final level, and it's a surprisingly much less forgiving amount than I had anticipated, so I learned pretty quickly that I should only give up on finding a bot if it's absolutely impossible for me to do so, which is why even though Creamy Canyon isn't necessary in order to beat the game, I'm still going to have to go to every world in order to collect as many bots as I possibly can. Fortunately, this level also wasn't too difficult and all of the bots were quite easy to get to. So let's move on to the Construction Derby level. Here we are introduced to the Bulldog Booster, a power-up that sends you flying over large distances, which practically replaces the need for the double jump boost, so in terms of movement this level was no problem. This spot was a bit scary. Don't attack me, please! That was scary. But then we did also run into a mechanic which could instantly end this challenge if it ever comes up in a required section, and it's this puzzle on the floor. Usually these are against walls where you feel for the tile that rumbles and push it inside, but you can't push the floor tiles. The way you're supposed to unlock them is with your lasers. Luckily I can just skip this part for now, but it definitely made me nervous for the future of this run. And also I had to give up on 100% in the game, which was a consideration I had in mind, but my new goal now was just to make sure I could at least reach the end credits. And all I could do was keep going forward and just hope that I don't encounter this puzzle again. I had 28 bots now though, which was just enough to unlock our first boss battle, but I had to actually get to the boss first. He's right behind me, isn't he? Okay, we're fine, go away. The fight itself actually went really well. I technically beat him first try, but just as I was about to finish the level, my PlayStation overheated, and so I waited for it to cool down, took him to pieces, which all felt a bit too familiar, but after clearing out the dust and putting it back together, it all worked fine. I did have to redo the boss and torture his eyeballs some more, but thankfully it didn't overheat again. The final level in the Gorilla Nebula is the Ape Escape franchise level, which is just running around collecting monkeys with a net, and they're all pretty easy to find, except for this one infuriating monkey. The laser boost would have definitely made this a lot easier. Annoyingly though, after a while of trying to outsmart him, I just turned my brain off and somehow managed to catch him. I rode up to the very top of the level, took out Spectra, and freed our first PlayStation component. And now that we've completed the Gorilla Nebula, we can head back to our broken ship and restore its memory unit. But then out of the sky, another satellite crash lands behind me. My army of bots very kindly built me a bridge across and helped me reach the satellite, which heads back out into space to unlock the Tentacle System for us to explore. Go-Go Archipelago is the first world we need to complete. I only just managed to jump across this gap to get one of the first bots, played with the dolphins for a bit, and discovered the Monkey Climber power-up. And this power-up isn't just for climbing. You can throw rocks at enemies and also break floors you would normally need the lasers for, so it ends up being a pretty straightforward level. And the boss fight at the end relies solely on the monkey mechanics, but I did scare myself right at the very end. When you defeat the boss, you get buried in the sand, and to get out of it you have to spam the jump button. This caused me to accidentally use my lasers for a split second right at the end. and I wasn't sure if this was an issue I caused or if there was just no way around it. So I had to restart the level, defeat the boss again, and I spammed the jump button a lot slower this time, which thankfully avoided the double jump and no lasers came out. Trunk of Funk was up next, which starts as any normal level, but actually if you waterboard this little sprout, it grows into a giant singing tree, which gives us another new power-up, the Elephant Hose Nose. This ability allows you to place platforms underneath you as you jump, which is very handy for these long jumps considering I can't use my boost, which all seemed great. We carried on through the level without any difficulty really. The worst part was the amount of volties I had to try and avoid, but even though I managed to get past them all, I eventually ran into something much worse. After bouncing up to the top of this ledge, I encountered what was unfortunately an unbreakable floor without my lasers. One look at this was enough to realise there would be no way to get to the end of this level and I had to drop out. But even though I couldn't finish the level, I still kept all the bots that I had found. The only problem now was if Downside Surprise also wasn't completable, then there would be no way of unlocking the next level and the entire challenge would be a failure. This level gives us the Micro Mouse Shrinker power-up, which lets us become tiny, and even though at the time I was very worried of failing the challenge here, you can already see that the video isn't ending anytime soon, which means for now, the challenge and also your mealtime entertainment are both safe. Which, by the way, if you do have food and think this video is a certified meal eating experience, then consider subscribing and I'll gladly accompany you on all your other meals. But as I said, we did manage to complete this level, and even though one bot looked like it was impossible to get to without breaking this glass, I still managed to get him by climbing to the top of this tower and jumping all the way down to where he was. And with all the bots found, I left the level through the secret galaxy ending. I decided not to touch these planets for now since they are bonus content, and I didn't want to waste time trying levels that might not be possible without knowing whether or not I can actually beat the game yet. But depending on how many bots I need in the future, I might have to come back to them. Instead, for now, I finally had my next level unlocked, and we were back on the right track to completing the game. This next level was set inside a cave, so I picked up Ellie and headed down under, and it was levels like these where I realised just how tricky some of the jumps can be without the extra height and length I get from double jumping, but they were all doable at the very least. But there was one section where the difficulty was significantly harder and for a short while genuinely felt impossible. It occurs right at the end of the level when we get swallowed by this giant worm. We have to climb our way out from his insides, which is gross and squishy, and then it's also like stomach acid or something rising up, so we're also on a time limit. Needless to say, it was one of the hardest sections so far. And just as I thought I was about to get out... No! I'm slow. I'm very slow. That might be too far, you know. Ooh, that might be too far. This went on for quite some time until I finally had my light bulb moment. You know what might be the play? Is if I can swing onto it. Jump! No way. We got it. Huge. I escaped the worm and flew back out into space and had just enough bots to unlock our second big boss battle. For this one we have the twin frog gloves again, which does mean I can get by exclusively with just these. But am I the only one who would love to know what these bosses have actually done to make Astro Bot so brutal with his attacks? Like at this point we've already won, he's completely knocked out, but Astro Bot grips onto this crying octopus's tears, sends him flying into space and he blows up. But I mean, Astro Bot is very cute, so I guess we can let it slide. I rescued Kratos and Atreus too, which unlocks one of the most fun levels in the game, the Bot of War level, where we can run around pretending to be Kratos, finding green ravens and picking up fan favourite characters. And I feel like this is as good a time as any to say how much I enjoyed this game. I had so much fun the first time playing it, and I'm enjoying this challenge just as much. But as much as there is to explore and as many Easter eggs there are to find, I am on a mission and have to keep moving forward. There was no need to use the double jump at all in this level, and I took down the Needhog, breaking free our second ship part. I once again cleaned it up, put it in its right place, and what's this? The satellite crashed again? I rescued a few more little guys and woke up the satellite once more, and this time he found Serpent Starway. In here, our first level is the Slow-Mo Casino, where we find another new power-up, Slow-Mo Vision. This one is a lot of fun because you can run around pretending to be Quicksilver, but what's not so fun is this spot I had to miss. He's passed a sequence of very difficult jumps, and just as I got to the end, I had to accept that he was just too high up and it wasn't possible to get him. And while it's not necessary to collect all the bots, I'm pretty sure this is the first one I've had to leave behind, so I was pretty sad about it. And this whole level ended up being extremely difficult in general, by far the hardest one I've had so far. There were quite a few places that were just out of reach, but none of it compared to the struggle I would endure with these darts. First up, there was this one small gap. I could get onto the dart no problem, but to get across, I really needed the extra height from his lasers. Yet somehow, on one attempt, I managed to make it up thanks to Astro Bot randomly deciding to grab onto the ledge. But that was just a small taster of much more to come. I really wanted to rescue Joker, so I went right first, but in order to get to him, timing was everything. I had to find the sweet spot of just when the dart dropped down low enough I could reach it, but not too low that the ladder would be too high up for me to grab onto. It took a couple of tries, but I did manage to get it and save Joker. But now for the big one. And I think the best way to see the difficulty of this is just by watching all of these failed attempts. The darts were at an awkward height to jump onto. The timing had to be perfect, and even when it was, I still ended up being too far away. And all of these issues would easily be solved if I just had that little bit of extra boost. But I didn't have that option. And I also didn't have the option of not completing this level. There was no other way to progress. I either made this jump or the run was over. So I just kept going in hopes that if I just get one chance where everything falls perfectly for me, maybe, just maybe, I'll be able to clear this gap. But then everything changed when I learned that I could jump onto the dart's tip. This solved the issue of the green dart being too far away by the time I reached it, but I still had to find that golden moment to make my move or else it wouldn't work. Nice. Yes! Don't die to those. It may have taken years off of my lifespan, but I still can't believe I made it. And I had quite a lot of room to spare. That last jump kind of made the whole thing look really easy. But I can finally put these darts behind me though, climb to the top of the slot machine and finish the level. And that also makes me happy because the next level has my favourite power up in the whole game, Sponge Bot. Aside from looking really cute, it also lets you absorb water to become huge and destroy everything in your path, which also makes the challenge really easy. This part right here is my favourite. But like I said, there's no need to double jump or laser kill anything the entire level, so as much as I love it, sadly it's time to move on. In this next level, we have to free this giant robot from its chains. It's easy enough to do, but there is unfortunately another bot I missed somewhere. I think it's below this breakable floor, which I obviously can't get past, but I'm just hoping that missing out on one or two bots won't be a massive issue for me later on. Once I freed the giant robot, all I had to do was climb up him and this giant tower. I somehow managed to just about get this last bot by actually breaking the floor from the side, which is good to know there might be some way past them in the future, but that wouldn't be needed for the rest of this level at least, putting us one level closer to the end of the game. Up next was the Trapped in Time level, which holds yet another power-up yet to be discovered. The chicken booster can send us flying into the air, which is very helpful in covering any height or distance issues I was having without my double jump. Because of this, nothing too noteworthy happened. There were a few voltees I had to avoid, but none of it was a real threat. So after the horrible slow motion level, we ended up getting to our next boss quite quickly. My army broke open the lock for me once again. I equipped myself with the chicken booster, got jump scared by some voltees, and headed up to face off against Lady Venom Mara. She isn't that difficult, you just have to jump up the towers to avoid her venom, and then break these glass frames as she slithers across the screen. There is a second stage after Astro Bot tries to rip her tongue out. This second stage is a little bit trickier, but ultimately not an issue as we uppercut her jaw, which made me question if it was actually pain we were dealing and not something else. But then I freed Nathan Drake from his treasure chest and headed on to his level. And Nathan Drake's power up in this level is also a lot of fun. It tears through any enemies in our path, including a way to finally put down some voltees. The music is great, the characters are great, it's just a fun time. And we're past the halfway point in the challenge now, and while there's still so much dread inside that any of the upcoming levels can put an end to it, it's nice to have levels like these where I can just enjoy the game for a short while. Another ship part rescued means another trip back to our home base. Slipping away vines, slotting it back into the PlayStation, and would you believe our satellite is once again hurtling through the sky and crash landing once more. Why he keeps doing this, who knows, but as long as me and my bots keep rescuing him, he keeps finding new areas to explore. This time it's the Camo Cosmo. And waiting for us inside the first level is the discovery of yet another untouchable enemy just like the Voltee. Well, almost like the Voltees. If you're quick enough, you can sneak up behind them and kill them before they enter their sonic spinny mode, but I can also just walk past them in most cases. Just a bit further ahead though, right after picking up Lara Croft, is yet another new discovery, a power-up called Muteki, which lets us turn into an indestructible ball and roll around wherever we please, which also provides us with a much easier way of killing the spinny guys. I rolled on through the rest of the level without missing a single bot, and then once I was finished, headed down into the underwater level, bubbling under, which I assumed wouldn't be an issue since I wouldn't be able to jump if I'm underwater the entire time, and after carefully pulling myself out the sand, that did prove to be the case. About 95% of the level is spent underwater where I can't double jump, so there isn't much to say about it. I'm also just not really that big of a fan fan of underwater levels in any game, so I wasn't that enthusiastic about being here anyways. Unfortunately, in the 5% of the level that isn't underwater, there is an unbreakable floor that houses a single bot we can't reach. But other than that, I found the rest of them and the level can be finished no problem. We were starting to fall short on bots though, and because of this, I definitely had to do the optional levels, which had the Octa Balloon power up. And as we know, this makes the challenge really easy, as it gives us more height and distance than any double jump ever could. There is this one part where I'm able to chop these logs in half with my lasers. I'm not entirely sure if it's here, but I did miss a bot in this level, and this is the only place I think it could be. So I am leaving this level once again one bot short. It isn't anything I'm actively worrying about though, since there are a lot of bonus levels where I can find more if I need to. Moving on though to the spooky time level. This level was actually a lot of fun, in the sense that it was very chaotic. It uses the slow-mo power up, and there's just ghosts around trying to kill me by throwing kitchen knives at unimaginable speeds, but I could just deal with these by walking straight past in slow-mo. What I couldn't deal with though was having to blow into my PlayStation controller while being chased by an unkillable Volty on a very small piece of land. Ah! Blow out, please! It takes so long to blow them out. Yeah, no, are they... Oh, I had them. Go! Nice. I'll admit, I did forget that I could slow down time, which did make the rest of the level a lot easier after I remembered, but one other tricky part was these invisible paths. The only way to see them is by holding this lantern, but in order to make some of the jumps, I have to attack to get some extra distance, which throws my lantern away, leaving me stranded. A bit annoying, but nothing to be concerned about. The level was still completable, albeit we did have to leave the beloved Jill Valentine behind, as she was just out of our reach. And this final segment was a little tricky, but Astro Bot clutched up for us at the end by holding onto the ledge and pulling us up to the end of the level. The final boss for this level needed 150 bots to unlock. I had 152, just 2 more than I needed, and the next requirement was going to be 200, so I definitely would have to do some bonus levels to catch up. But I can worry about that later. For now, I just need to worry about getting past this boss. And I think you should be pretty worried about me getting past it as well. Okay, so lock in. Put me back on the main monitor just for a bit. Okay, this is a run-defining moment. I was up against Mecha Leon, a very strong boss who has an extremely worrying mechanic. In between his attacks, he sends out waves of smaller enemies. That in itself is not a problem, right? But it could be, and it very much was. You see, after dodging its fireballs, running up its tongue like a young Luffy, and beating up his uvula, he runs back to a second platform and starts a second stage, where after his first attacks, it sends out another wave of enemies, including 3 Volties. This was a massive problem. I could not kill these of my own accord, but Mecha Leon won't continue the fight unless I do. Simply put, I didn't stand a chance. But it would be pretty lame for me to just give up on the spot. And as far as I was concerned, I still had 2 options. Just 2 ideas that if neither of them work, I would have to call it quits. The first thing I noted was that the Volties don't spawn alone. They have 2 fire-spitting chameleons that spawn with them. So my initial thought was, what if the other enemies would be able to kill the Volties for me? This idea was unfortunately shut down very quickly, which meant I was left with my final resort, which was trying to see if I could somehow get them to fall off the platform and die a more natural death. The outside of the platform was an instant rule-out since there was invisible walls stopping anything, including me, from walking off. But I was very fortunate that his first attack before the Volty spawns leaves a giant hole in the platform which doesn't have any invisible barriers. Getting the Volties into this hole was genuinely the only way I would ever be able to move on. The problem is their edge detection is insanely good. They would sooner turn on themselves than they would run off one of these edges voluntarily, which meant I had to find a way to manipulate them into doing so. Somehow. I wasn't sure if it could be done, and to be honest, I had kind of come to terms with the challenge being over, but that didn't stop me from still mindlessly playing and hoping for some kind of miracle to happen. I experimented a bit by restarting the level and moving to the side of the map so that the missiles would blow a hole right on the edge of the platform. This was in hopes that it would have an effect on the invisible barrier somehow. Obviously it didn't, but in a turn of events, the miracle we waited for finally decided to show itself. I got one. One fell in. One of the Volties fell to its death, and I saw exactly how it happened. With a newfound spirit, I tried to guide the remaining 2 Volties into the same positions, and by moving myself slowly in the direction I want them to follow me, the second Volty fell in. And this time it was no miracle. It was manipulation, and I knew exactly how it worked. I think I know how it works. and I think the way the shape of the floor has broken plays a part in it. The volties always run in a straight line towards me, so wherever that line is, there needs to be a section of void larger than the voltie's foot, but less than half of his body so that he's still able to walk over it. But the most crucial part, which is very unfortunate for me, is having another voltie in front of it that can't move forward itself, acting as an invisible entity that slowly pushes the voltie behind him off of the edge. But now that that's worked with 2 of them, I have nothing left to push off the last one with. I tried guiding him into the same places, but without that extra voltie in its way, it just wouldn't budge. Even though he was practically dangling off the edge, he just wouldn't fall in. There had to be something to push him. Obviously, it couldn't be me because I just die on impact, which left the only other thing with a hitbox being the arena itself. I did notice from a bit earlier on that they can't fully walk on this outer rim before colliding with the invisible wall, so I very carefully walked out to the edge of the map with him as close behind as possible until he got himself stuck into this position. But this was perfect. It had everything I needed: a crack in the path large enough for its foot to fall down, and a solid entity to push him into it as he edges towards me. And with a few taunting wiggles... No way! The voltie took one step too far. I couldn't believe it, but I didn't have any time to process it. There was still a long fight left to go, and I was on my last life. I couldn't mess this up, or else I'd be sent right back to the start, and I don't know if I'd get the same hole pattern again, or if my method was even guaranteed to work twice, so I had to finish this. But once again, waiting for me in the final stage.
There's another one, dude. There can't be another one.
As you can imagine, this was a devastating sight, but something I've managed to overcome 3 times already. Based on what I knew from the previous encounters, there was only one possible place this guy would fall off, but I really wasn't that hopeful. Even so, I led him to this curve in the platform, jumped as far out as possible to bait the voltie before turning back just in time, and when I landed, I looked around. I got him! And the voltie was gone. I dodged his final attack, ran up his tongue, and beat his uvula for the last time. I'd done it. The fight was over at this point, but I was so stressed that I'd completely forgotten how to play the game.
There's no way. What do I do now? I forgot what I do here. What do I do? I forgot what I do. I hold on to it. Of course I hold on to it.
But when I finally remembered to hold onto his nose ring and pull off probably the most painful move Astro Bot's twisted mind could have come up with, the fight was finally over and the challenge was still alive. And to make things even better, waiting for us at the end is Kulchi from Loco Roku. And the next level is a complete 180 from the stress and anxiety I was feeling 2 minutes ago, and I could just sit back and enjoy this very wholesome level. And as much as I would love to pack up my things and live in this world, my PlayStation was still broken and there was still one more part I needed to find. So I headed back, fixed the cooling system, which I'm very experienced in now. The satellite crashed right on time, but before I went to save him, there was one thing I wanted to do first. I had just unlocked the gacha lab, so I took some time out to do that because I really wanted to find the red panda outfit, but it never showed up, so I reluctantly had to leave and go back to being a responsible robot. The power of friendship once again rescues the satellite, revealing the final galaxy left to complete, the Feather Cluster. And as we head down to our first world, I want to remind you that we are running slightly short on bots, so I wanted to collect every single one here again if possible, even if they were dangling above 3 very scary volties, which I still have PTSD from. And them deciding to leave their post and chase me around the entire map definitely wasn't helping.
Leave me alone.
Luckily, I was safe as long as I had the high ground though, and managed to get all the bots in the area before making my escape. There was quite a tricky jumping sequence, but right after that I picked up the Bulldog Blaster, which let me fly through the rest of the level, picking up all the bots and taking down the genie at the end. I headed down next into Lunar Solar. I had to be cautious here that I don't jump on any of these railings at any point, since that will instantly bring out my lasers, but when you reach the end it jumps off on its own anyways, so it wasn't really a problem. I kept moving forward and unfortunately came across this puzzle that I couldn't get past, so it wasn't possible to get all of the bots in this level. And I knew that's where Sackboy was as well, so I was quite sad to leave him behind even though it was out of my control. I ran past some more troubling volties and eventually made it to the end, and when I headed back into space this time, I opted to go for Orbital Blitz, which I think is a bonus level or something. A 4th planet isn't normally in the other areas, but it had some extra bots I would definitely be needing, so I had to do it anyway. The first spot here was probably the hardest one. It was another case of getting the timing just right so that I had enough height to reach him, and the thing I've noticed with this is a lot of these jumps feel really difficult, but then when you actually land them, it always ends up looking so easy that I feel like if I never showed the failed attempt, attempts, this game would look like there was never a double jump feature in the first place. But I will admit, avoiding the bikers and landing this jump first time did at least feel somewhat cool to me at the time. At least until I did this. In fact, this whole level was just a bit harder than the rest in general, but the soundtrack was very fun and there was nothing me and my chicken booster couldn't handle. I beat up the UFO, but unbeknownst to me, I finished the level having actually missed one of the bots somewhere. I don't think it was that important though. I was only 17 bots away from unlocking the final boss battle, but there were still plenty of places to pick up some more, 2 of which are the remaining 2 levels. I headed to Frozen Meal first, crashed into literally every iceberg I could see and started my bot hunting. I picked up Jodie Holmes, and then Sam from Death Stranding, a few regular bots, and also had a pretty skeptical ice skating session to find Connor from Detroit Become Human. But that was everyone now. Thankfully the ending wasn't too difficult and I only needed my spinny attacks, but I was still 10 bots short, so down into Cannon Brawl I went. This was a metal wall power-up, which does mean there isn't really ever a need to be doing double jumps, nor did I have to worry about any volties. So I picked up the 5 regular bots and 2 Demon Soul bots before taking on the giant pirate at the end, which isn't really an issue when you're an indestructible ball. But that was all the main levels done now, and I was still 3 bots short. I had a few options like the Lost Void levels and the Lost Galaxy levels, but I just went for the easiest ones I could think of, picked up 3 bots and headed to the last of the bosses before we take on the big bad alien, which I am delighted to say is nowhere near as problematic as the last one. Even though it did have the same mechanic where it spawns waves of enemies, luckily none of them were volties. So all I had to do was kill what spawned, run across one of the wings to bounce on one of the buttons, and then run up to his head to try and break his helmet. Repeat that 3 times, pummel his lump for a bit to knock him out, and free Aloy from this egg. From here we hop on my controller and fly down into what will be the last level we have to complete. Aloy gives us her famous bow which can take out anything, including our arch nemesis, which means I'll never have to be afraid of them again. So as long as there's no traversal problems, the challenge will be a success. I made my way through, rescuing bots, hopping past platforms, avoiding tripwires, I swam underwaters and climbed up tall necks, all for what will hopefully be the very last time as I approach the end of the game. I sprang on vines and jumped through crocodile jaws until finally hopped aboard this sea turtle's back. I wasn't in for a peaceful ride though. I still had to take on Blunderjaw. Luckily you don't have to do anything at all for this fight other than point and shoot. The real MVP of this fight is definitely the sea turtle. I'm just here for the ride. But my final shot to the head puts an end to the fight and we can walk towards the final missing piece. Sorry, now we can walk towards the final piece. After of course some of Astro Bot's signature eye torture. But with that the protective covers were finally in our possession. I scrubbed them clean, put the mothership back together and he was feeling as good as new. It was a party at the crash site. Everyone was dancing happily, but that unfortunately wouldn't last long as Space Bully Nebulax shows up and reminds us that our CPU is still kidnapped. Which, I mean, yeah, we probably shouldn't have been celebrating yet. That's a pretty important piece, right? Either way, Astro Bot is not happy anymore. We gather our bots aboard the mothership and make haste towards the alien. With the press of a button, all past generation ships emerge and we all work as one to slaughter an entire species? Maybe? I don't know, I don't really have time to question the moralities of it all because look how cool we all look together. It gets to a point though where we end up in a 1v1 against Nebulax. Spinning this wheel determines what power up we get, but all of this fighting doesn't ever require me to bring my own lasers out or double jump. So as I run over to obliterate his fingers and finally reunite with the CPU, I can finally say that you can beat Astro Bot without using his lasers or ever double jumping. But it's not quite finished just yet. Nebulax returns once more, throwing enemies at all of my bots, but as I stop him this time, a black hole emerges, sucking Nebulax inside. In desperation, he grabs hold of Astro Bot, trying to take him with him. My bots wouldn't let that happen. They all rush out to get me and engage in a tug of war against Nebulax. Astro Bot, though, knowing everyone is edging closer to the black hole, decides to let go, sacrificing himself to save all of the other bots. They all gather around to mourn their lost friend. This game isn't that depressing though, don't worry. Astro Bot comes back and they all start fixing him together. When I saw this the first time, I thought that they were ripping off their own limbs to give Astro Bot, which actually would have been quite a bit dark, but I guess they just had some spare pieces lying around or something. Anyway, once all that is done, we actually have to play through the credits. There's no enemies to worry about or any difficult jumps, so after all that, now we can officially say that the game has been beaten, and Astro and all of his bots can finally dance together once again.